I wanted to talk about, and there has been a previous session that covered some of this, but just in case you haven't seen it, we have a tool called Remote Connectivity Analyzer. It can be found at this URL, testconnectivity.microsoft.com. At this URL, we have a ton of tests, but the most exciting test that I can think of that is related to this topic is a test for analyzing email message headers. Now, analyzing email message headers can tell you a lot of information about the email. Some of the metadata includes if you have a message that has been received, you can see where the delays were in the path of that message. You can see things like spam scores and so on and so forth. What I will do really quickly is I will actually, since we have a few extra minutes, I'm going to flip over to an example of this. This is the website. You click on the Message Analyzer tab, and let us grab some. This is a spam message that was actually in my junk mail. I'm going to copy the entire header, return back over here, and I'm going to paste it in. Click this Analyze Header button. Nothing gets transmitted over the internet. All analysis is done in JavaScript on the client side. And you'll see that I've got this result. For anti-spam settings, you can now click and read more information about what the headers mean. For some of the other headers, it will take you to either the RFC that describes what that header is useful for, or a site that tries to explain what that header is for. So this is a very useful tool in analyzing message delays and understanding more about the metadata of your message. Now, one thing I wanted to point out that's new here is that there is a link that allows you to install this onto either your Exchange server on premises or your Office 365 environment. You can actually install this, and I will show what that looks like here as we return to the slide deck. So inside the Admin Center, you can go to the organization, you can add applications, and you can choose who they are provided to within your organization. This is a sample of what the header analyzer looks like inside of Outlook Web Access, Outlook Web App. All right. Now, on to the bulk of the presentation, which is about message trace feature. There is a feature in Office 365 which allows you to get metadata about messages not only that have been received by your organization, but also have been sent by your organization. I look at it as being similar to how you would track a package or track any other shipment, for example. The new features that we have deployed in the past month are, number one, you can now search up to 90 days worth of log files. And then something which is near and dear to my heart and we'll be going into some additional detail on, which is the ability to obtain additional routing details about the message. This information is extremely useful when working with support and can give you a lot of additional detail. So let's talk a little bit about how the message trace feature is put together. As we'll see in a second, there is a single user interface that is offered for this feature called Message Trace. However, it really behind the scenes consists of two fundamental features. The first one is the message trace that you may have become familiar with over the past 2 or 3 years with the service, and that is the ability to search for messages more or less in real time. What I mean by that is you can query any message that has been sent or received in any time prior to the past 15 minutes or so, and you will be able to get all kinds of information. It is fairly basic, but all kinds of information relatively quickly. So as soon as you enter the search parameters, you will be able to get the search results, and they will be displayed for you right there inside the user interface. In addition, we now have a new feature, sometimes known as extended message trace or historical search. This new feature is also integrated into the same user experience, but it allows you to get additional details and search on messages anywhere from 8 hours old to 90 days old. This functionality, because it is searching a large amount of information, the information is not presented in real time, but is instead available for download, as we'll see in a second. You can obtain additional routing details. Your queries can be larger and can encompass more information. And as I mentioned, because the query goes and executes and then returns results potentially hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours later, you can configure an email notification address to receive a link when or a notification when the job is completed. Some other interesting facts are presented here on the slide comparing the two features. All right, now let's see what this actually looks like. So first of all, if you're not familiar with where to find Message Trace, in the Office 365 administration portal, if you select Admin from the top bar and then select Exchange, you will enter what is called the Exchange Admin Console or Exchange Control Panel. Then on the left, you will see a drop-down selection of choices. If you choose Mail Flow on the left, and then Message Trace from the tabs up at the top, that will get you to this feature. Once you are in this feature, you will see a screen that looks sort of like this. First thing you'll notice is at the top there is a View Pending or Completed Traces. That is where you will be able to go and check the status of jobs that you have submitted, as well as obtain downloads of those jobs results. As I mentioned, it is a single UI. So by default, you just get access to the basic functionality. By default, you can search the past 24 hours, or you can specify a custom range or other intervals. You can choose to narrow your search further using things like delivery status, message ID, which is extremely useful, or a combination of any or both of sender or recipients. In the sender or recipient fields, you can type any email address that you'd like, or you can use wildcards. One quick note about wildcards while we're here. I pointed out later in the slides, but while we're here talking about the wildcards, the UI currently tells you that you can do things like d** at contoso.com or *d. At the moment that does not work. We will be removing that from the UI. But you can still do * at contoso.com. You can do any other wildcards. So we will modify that in the UI to reflect what is possible. Looks like PowerPoint is frozen again. Here's what I will do. I will restart it one more time, and then if it continues to have problems, we'll just switch to the live demo. All right. So in order to get access to the new functionality through the UI, as I mentioned, you could select a date range that is custom. If you specify a start date that is outside of 7 days, then automatically you will get the new functionality from the UI. Let's talk about some helpful hints as we're getting into querying through this new experience. First of all, selecting a more narrow time frame may help your job to complete a little bit more quickly. However, it ultimately does depend upon the load that is on our system at the time, so you may not see results that scale according to what you have specified. But just as a helpful hint, you do want to narrow your date range as much as possible. In addition, you will want to specify either a sender or a recipient or a message ID. Message ID is, in my opinion, the most helpful because it allows you to troubleshoot a single message. However, as I mentioned on that first page, you do have to be mindful of the fact that this extended feature only allows you to issue approximately 15 queries per day per tenant. When you specify a date outside of 7 days, you get a little drop down beneath the UI that has the following details. It allows you to select include additional or message events and routing details with the report. It also allows you to specify a notification email address, as I mentioned before, email address that you'll be notified at when the job completes. You can title the report that you're going to issue, and you can also filter by client IP address if you'd like. I don't necessarily recommend that, but it is one additional filter that is exposed in the UI. When you click Submit, instead of getting the results in a pop-up window in real time, you get a pop-up that says your message trace job has been submitted, and you will be able to check on the job progress at that link at the top, as I mentioned before. We'll go through this in a second in the demo. When you sign up for a notification, you get an email that looks similar to the screenshot at the top. This one says that no data was found, so the notice is customized to your actual result set. So a few things to keep in mind. If you get no results, it means that one of two things probably happened, or three things. Either that message that you searched on or the criteria was too narrow, or the message was never handled by our system, or as I mentioned, this functionality requires that the message be in a special database. This database requires essentially generally about 4 to 8 hours before the messages will be processed and added to the database. That's because we have to go gather the log files and collect them off the servers. So if you're searching inside of 8 hours and using this functionality, you may not get a result. When you click the View Pending or Completed Traces, you get a pop-up that looks like the bottom screenshot, where you can click on a particular report and then scroll on the right and see the status of the report and potentially the download link for the report if it's available, if it's complete. As you can see, I've got 3 reports issued on 3 requests that were submitted on 3 different times. One had 1 message result, the others had 160 and 161 respectively. So for those results, the email message up at the top that you would receive would look a little bit different. Now I mentioned that the other possibility is that you can exceed the maximum number of results for a particular query. There are 2 different maximums that you need to be aware of when doing this extended message trace. The first thing is if you're doing an extended message trace without the routing details, you can return up to 5,000 results. If you get 5,000 results or more, then the results will be truncated. What I mean by truncated is that because these results are processed potentially in a variety of different orders by a ton of different servers, what you need to keep in mind is that you should not expect just the first 5,000 results in order of time. Instead, you should think of it as all the order is all jumbled up. So because of that, I would not personally trust a result of 5,000 to be complete in that case. And you will get a warning message that says that it was truncated. Similarly, if you select the additional routing details checkbox, then the limit decreases to 3,000, and you should not consider 3,000 to be a complete result. Now you can certainly narrow your query at that point and reissue it. You can also download the incomplete truncated results, and you can still look through them. There is still certainly a chance that you might find some piece of what you're looking for. However, you should not consider it to be a complete set, and you should narrow your query. Okay, when you click on that download link, you'll be asked to download a CSV file. Certainly you can use any text editor to open your CSV file. However, my personal favorite is to open it in Excel. You may not want to directly open it. You may want to save it and then open it. I have seen in some locales issues with processing the CSV within Excel. For example, the timestamps. The timestamps can either be parsed by Excel as a timestamp or as a text string. Sometimes Excel does not behave appropriately, and you need to actually run through the CSV Import wizard. Once the CSV is in Excel, the first thing I like to do is I like to click the Data and then Filter button, which allows me to filter on the field names, which you see up there at the top, and get the little arrows. We'll go through an example of this in a second. Additionally, I like to sort by date time. Now, Alternately, you can sort or filter by any number of things, as we'll see in a second. There is documentation on message trace in TechNet for Exchange Online. However, the link that I'm providing to you over here on the right is a link to the on-premises documentation. The reason for doing that is when you check the checkbox for additional routing details, it essentially provides you with the same sort of results that you would get in an on-premises Exchange environment. And so I've provided a link to the additional details that provide the description of what the sources are and the event IDs are. At this point, let us go to the let's do one more slide, which is on PowerShell, and then we will get to the long-awaited demo. All right, so as I mentioned, behind the scenes, even though there is only one UI, behind the scenes there are two different features. Likewise, in PowerShell, there are two different sets of commandlets. For the basic message trace, you can simply use get-message trace, get-message trace detail. That will allow you to get the real-time functionality or near real-time functionality that you're used to seeing when you double-click on a message within 7 days. For the extended or historical search feature, there are new commandlets: start historical search, stop historical search, and get historical search. These commandlets do exactly what they imply, which is you can issue a query with start historical search, you can stop a pending query, or you can obtain all the historical searches that are out there and see their current status, as well as potentially get a link. Now, you cannot actually download the results directly in PowerShell and parse them in PowerShell easily. However, you can obtain the link, which then can be distributed or clicked on. I also want to make a quick comment about the historical search feature that I may have skimmed over, which is when you have results, they will be available for up to 7 days. One other neat thing about PowerShell is that you can issue a query, as we'll see in a second, inside of 7 days. So the UI is set up such that if you query inside of 7 days, it will do a basic search. It will do a real-time search. If you query outside of 7 days, then it will issue a historical search. So it's a single experience. However, in PowerShell, you have additional flexibility, so you can actually issue a historical search inside of 7 days. In addition, the historical search functionality also allows you to query on some additional things, like, for example, the DLP or transport rule that fired. All right, as I promised, let us get to the demo. I have already browsed to the message trace feature inside of Exchange Admin Center. This is the new functionality that I pointed out. You can see jobs that have been completed. As you can see, I've got 3 jobs, one of which is currently in progress. The first 3 of which have no results, so those were bad queries on my part. And then I have 2 that were completed earlier by another admin, and which do have that download link available to download the results. When I expand the query outside of the 7-day window, that is when this additional options becomes available for this historical search, and that's the hint that you're going to be doing a historical search. This checkbox is the checkbox that allows you to get the rich details that you would from an Exchange on-premises environment that will be extremely useful if you're working with support or if you're familiar with Exchange. Tracking logs. Let me show an example of doing a wildcard or an address. In the sender, I have actually selected myself. However, you can also type a wildcard, as you can see right there. All right. The next thing is let's go look at PowerShell for a second. As you can see, I've got two commands that I've entered into the window here. The first one, what I am doing is issuing a search. I have specified a start date of today and an end date of the current time, which is obtained by using this getDate command. What this will do is this will pull all log results that have been processed. So it would not obtain anything potentially within the last few hours, but it would get messages that may have been handled by the system overnight or earlier in the day. Get historical search is the command that allows you to see what the jobs statuses are. If I want to, for example, look at that first one, let's look at the extended or the additional information that's available through that commandlet. And you can see that there is a file URL which allows you to go download those details. 6 results in this one. Okay. Now, without further ado, let's switch over to looking at some specific traces. Actually, I'm just going to quickly show this because I do have some slides that have exact examples. But here, as you can see, you can filter on source, you can filter, I've sorted by date time. I've also selected a specific message ID. As I mentioned, there were 6 results in this, and I can instantly narrow to the message that I want by filtering on the message ID. For this particular message, it was an incoming message. I can see that because one of the first events here was an SMTP receive event. Also, the directionality over here says incoming, although that is not always perfectly 100% accurate. The directionality is determined based upon our logic inside the cloud. So incoming is defined from Office 365's point of view. Message subject, and then custom data and recipient status are the 2 fields for seeing exactly what happened with this message. As you can see right here, recipient status, this means that the recipient was in fact received, even though it was not delivered to the mailbox. The reason this particular one was not delivered to the mailbox is because it was caught and quarantined by spam filter. I'll highlight some of that in a second for you. Returning back to the slide deck for a second, some of you may be wondering, well, this looks like a ton of detail, and so you may be wondering, what about delivery reports? Delivery reports are currently shown right here. Now, delivery reports does have the advantage of being able to search by subject. Delivery reports also has the advantage that end users can track their own messages. However, I want to make a statement about delivery reports. Delivery reports is a best effort only. It is not considered the final authoritative source. For that, we are investing in message trace. In fact, delivery reports, what we're currently planning, I don't have an ETA for this, but what we're currently planning is we are actually going to remove this functionality at some point from the administrator's UI. And the administrator will be required to use message trace. Now, for end users can still do their own delivery reports. The biggest reason for that is that the current delivery reports feature, as those of you who have Exchange on premises may be aware, essentially is trying to access the log files as they sit on the Exchange servers themselves. So what you will find in Office 365 is that delivery reports will work for a short period of time, but if those log files are no longer on the server because they have been archived, then the results will just simply be incomplete. The message trace functionality, however, the logs are available for up to 90 days. So that is the feature that we are investing in and is considered to be more complete. All right, now I promised to go back to some slides, so let me, because my PowerPoint is messed up again, I'm just going to go to those slides manually. Okay. I think we're getting somewhere. Just give me one more second to get to the slide that I would like. All right, here is an example of an inbound message, as I mentioned, that got sent to quarantine. By filtering on agent, what that does is that allows me to see all the agents, all the transport agents that acted on the message. This can be transport rules, this can be anti-spam, this can be anti-malware. Whenever it's an agent, you can see additional information about the particular agent and what the agent did by looking at the custom data field. So in this case, it was deemed to be a spam message. If you look at that third entry, the one that says agent info, let me grab a pointer. This one right here, as you can see in the anti-spam results, it was marked as spam with an SCL of 9. This was also bulk mail. And therefore, the next two entries are showing that it was sent to quarantine instead of delivered to the mailbox. Now, one thing I want to point out here is that these entries, even though I have filtered them by date time, they do appear to be out of order. So filtering by date time will get you close, but for a single message, you may need to be mindful of the order in which events occur and not focus too much on the order as it appears. One other trick that I can use to see that the bottom entry was first, the total bytes, the total size of the message, as you can see, it was 128,566, and after we added the anti-spam headers to the message, it increased ever so slightly in size. Some of the general rules of thumb as far as what to look for. If you don't see any record of the message, as we mentioned before, it either means that you've searched too quickly and you need to give it additional time, or you'll need to check with the sender because perhaps that message does not exist in our system, no record of that message. Additionally, check hygiene for inbound messages because anti-spam can certainly act on messages that are coming into our system. Look for hints about where it may have gone. Look for things like forwarding, rules, redirect events, things like that are very useful. Ultimately, if it was delivered to the mailbox, you will see a delivery event ID. Right, now give me 1 second to manually switch to the next slide. I apologize for the additional delay. While I do that. All right, and this is troubleshooting in Outbound. And these are just examples. Every individual situation will vary. For outbound situations, the main things that you're going to be looking for are, A, was the message even handled by the message email transport, the service transport? If there's no record of the event, of the message, then it is possible that the sending client, perhaps Outlook, was not even connected to the service, and you need to check to make sure that the client is connected to the service and was able to submit the email. Make sure it's not stuck in the drafts folder or the outbox. Generally speaking, what you're going to want to do in the outbound mail flow, you can certainly look for anti-spam events and things like that, because it is certainly possible that an email that's going outbound would be scanned and deemed as spam, or have malware that's attached to it, or not pass organizational rules. But typically, what you're going to be looking for is the SMTP send event. And you're going to be wanting to look at the recipient status. The recipient status will tell you if the remote host accepted the message. In addition, you'll want to look at that server IP, which will tell you what the remote IP was that accepted the mail. There's some other detail that I've cut off by accident in the custom data field that's also useful. All right, I think at this point I have spent plenty of time talking about the current functionality and how to use it. In order to leave time for the end, let's move, or the questions at the end. The one thing I want to go ahead and say, and I'm not going to move to the slide because of my slide show issues, is if you are wondering why we have taken two features and put them into one UI, our plan is to make the message trace functionality that you get, the basic message trace functionality. We're trying to add additional details to this message trace functionality and present it in a way where you do not have to know how to read these advanced Exchange message tracking logs. We want to give you all the information that you need to resolve your issue and know where the message was handed off to, for example, all the different agents that may have acted on the message that are important to note, but without overwhelming you with a lot of additional server names and details that really will not be useful to you. So that is our plan. We have provided the additional detail in the routing events to help you troubleshoot in the short term, but in the long run we really do want to make the basic functionality better and we want to provide those results to you in as close to real time as possible, which is what the basic functionality gives you. So that's why the UI, we designed it in such a way that it's just one feature. So that's a little bit about the future direction of where we are going with Message Trace. We certainly welcome your feedback. We'll be focusing on usability, as I mentioned, making the details good enough to determine what happened in most cases, but without overwhelming you. One thing else I will mention, because we covered message headers and we covered the message header analyzer, we are in the process, I believe, very soon of rolling out ability to look at message headers while they are inside of your quarantine. This is a much asked for feature. The message header will allow you to open it up in the header analyzer as well. So you'll be able to link over to that and cut and paste your headers in, which allows you to do analysis on messages before you release them from quarantine.